Life's gonna lift him again.
To start off, I bet many of you, even the ones from Bakersfield, don't know that Buck Owens' first name was actually Alvis. You can look it up. It was Alvis Edgar Owens Jr. And you probably didn't know there's a famous English car called the Alvis. Here's a picture. Check out that logo, huh? But the best part is what the word Alvis actually means. Turns out it's a Scandinavian word that means all wise. Huh, well how about that? I wonder if Buck knew what his real first name meant. I bet his dad knew the score. So this show isn't about Alvis Buck Owens, no. And it isn't about the Alvis vintage car either, even though we will be talking quite a bit about cars. I guess you could call this an Alvis car because this is my car and my name is Mark Alvis. But that's not the most important thing. When it comes to climate change, you've probably heard the term the new normal used to describe the results of too much CO2 in the atmosphere. Higher temperatures, more powerful hurricanes, massive wildfires, and devastating floods. The new normal in this context is definitely not a good thing. To me, the new normal means the new way we are going to have to live, which includes the new way we're going to have to think. More technology doesn't mean we can think less, it means we have to know more. We live in a world filled with technology, which takes some real brain power to understand. Yet I get the sense from advertising, the mainstream media, and much of the entertainment industry that it's okay to be ignorant. It isn't. We are now at the point where we can no longer afford to be bystanders. We must all take decisive, meaningful action. To do this, we must all be educated on the effects of climate change, which requires more than a basic understanding of science. More than money, it is ignorance that allows us to continue on with business as usual. The rapid pace of technological improvements is mind-boggling. We now take for granted things we hadn't even imagined a few decades ago. Our planes, our cars, our computers, our phones, all incredible and more on the way. It was this ability of humans to build things that led me to believe we could solve climate change simply with technology. We caused the problem, we can fix it. I called the idea techno-environmentalism. I figured with improved technology, we could build better, more efficient houses, better cars, and cleaner planes. I now know that while technology can certainly help, we need to do something that may be even harder. Change our minds. Technology has improved our lives in many ways, in medicine, in communication, in growing food. But because of its complexity, we have become dependent on it without really knowing how a lot of it works. The current generation has grown up in a world where there were always computers and smartphones. I know people who would literally be lost without GPS. Out of the millions, maybe billions who now have smartphones, how many actually know how they work? I don't just mean how to use them. I mean, how do radio waves work? How do computers work? And for that matter, how does electricity work? I'm relatively good at fixing things. I can fix a leaky pipe or a leaky roof. I can even do a little soldering when pressed. Jen thought it was a miracle when I fixed her TV. I understand how water heaters work. I can even build a house. But I would never even consider trying to fix a smartphone. Our current paradigm doesn't require us to understand how things work. As our gadgets have become more numerous and more complicated, it takes more people and more time to understand how to fix and fly them. I understand we can't all be pilots or surgeons or computer programmers. I understand the need for specialists. But somewhere along the way, it became accepted to have experts do not only specialized things, but also the things most of us used to do, like grow food, get water, and take care of children, build shelters, and look up at the stars. Within this disconnection from the basics of our existence is sown the loss of understanding of our connection to nature. After he got out of the Navy, my dad was a Fuller Brush salesman for a few years. He was good at it. People liked him. He sold things that people needed, like brooms and brushes and scouring pads. They were well made and fairly priced. From him, I learned that a good salesman is like a good doctor. You don't really want to see them, but it feels pretty good when the transaction goes well. A good salesman only sells you what you actually need. As soon as we can hear, we are told over and over that the more you have, the happier you'll be. More is always better. In our current economy, growth is not an option, it is a requirement. Grow or die. For a long time, most companies have believed the only way to prosper is to sell ever more stuff. Now, that concept is more than fraying, it is decaying. We are led to believe that our happiness is the goal of all this consumption. In reality, the goal of the current system is not happiness, but profit. Anyone in business knows that. Buying stuff is only a part of the mechanism, not the goal. Even those who benefit most by the system seldom seem truly happy. Yes, I need tools to build houses and produce TV shows, and I admit I kind of get a thrill when I buy a new camera or computer or saw, but I think that's because all mixed up in there is the idea that if we only had that thing, we would be rich or famous, or maybe even happy. I'm as good example of this as anyone else. I keep buying more stuff, partly because I'm told that's what I should do, but also because I actually believe that having that new camera or computer or saw will allow me to make the world a better place. If we want things to change, we're going to have to change ourselves and start making hard decisions when it comes to how we affect our environment and each other. At the minimum, we're going to have to learn how it all fits together so we can all live together. The new normal is going to be always seeing the big picture and acting accordingly. Phil and I graduated from UC Santa Cruz in 1982. A week after graduation, we rode our bicycles up to Vancouver, British Columbia, and back. He went on to get a master's and PhD from UC Berkeley. Phil has a uniquely balanced view of climate change and has taught me more about it than anyone I know.
I am an expert in atmospheric chemistry and air pollution. I've worked for 30 years at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I have a PhD in civil and environmental engineering from the University of California at Berkeley. And there I studied, all about air chemistry, all about air pollution. So I'm an air pollution expert, and in the 30 years that I've worked, mostly I've been thinking about pollutants that directly impact people's health. Things like smog and fine particulate matter that get inside our lungs and cause damage directly to our health. Now, in the last decade at least, the agency where I work in the Bay Area has been thinking very seriously and in a focused way about climate. And so I've been adapting my skills as an atmospheric scientist to understanding what we can do as a regulatory agency to, move things along in a effective way to regulate climate pollutants as well. So climate, I think we all have a pretty intuitive sense of what climate is. So here in California, we have a Mediterranean climate, which means mostly dry summers, hardly any rain. Almost all of our rain comes during the winter months. And we, our economic systems, the species that live in California, the plants and the animals that live in California have all adapted to that cycle. We know when spring is going to come, and of course it varies from year to year. That's, I think, the tricky thing about climate is it's different from weather. Any given year we might have a wet season, we might not get the normal amount of rain I mean, we were almost guaranteed not to have the normal amount of rain in any given year. But I think looking over the years, over the decades, we're used to kind of a steady state system where, you know, if you average it out, we have about the same thing. But now what we're seeing is a change in that steady state. Climate change is a change in what we've grown accustomed to, what we people have grown accustomed to, our planting cycles, our what we rely on in terms of where we can live, where we can't live, is changing, and the plants and animals are having to adapt rapidly to a change in that normal cycle. So of course what's happening is there's more CO2 and other greenhouse gases that trap the long wave radiation that would normally go out away from the Earth. So there's a buildup of heat in the system, which means that temperatures are gradually increasing across the globe. What it doesn't mean is that for every location on the planet that the temperatures have gone up by the same amount. What it means is there's more heat trapped in the global system, which also means that there's more moisture available in the global system and more overall energy available in the overall system. What that means is that there are more violent storms, more hurricanes, and that we've seen and we've been tracking over the decades that there have been more storms, more damaging storms. It also means, because the overall higher heat levels, that ice caps are melting, that the polar climate is changing, and that the sea level is rising, so that coastal communities, islands, are having to adapt rapidly to sea level change. It is really a question about health. When I was a kid, I spent 2 weeks when I was about 6 years old in an oxygen tent. I had bad asthma, and so at least at that time, you know, your parents take you to the hospital, and you spend, you know, you're in this oxygen tent, and it's scary. You're a kid, you don't know like why you're in this tent. You know you're having trouble breathing, and you know it's better, you know, when you're in this oxygen tent. But it was a traumatic experience, both the not being able to breathe, and then the, you know, the treatment of it was almost as scary as the disease itself. So for me, having clean air to breathe is really important. I like to be physically active. I like to ride my bike. I used to run a lot. Those things are great, unless you're breathing in dirty, polluted air, in which case it's really unpleasant. And so for me, the health aspect, you know, what can I do to improve health, and what can I do to give us all clean air to breathe? That was the underlying, that's sort of the kernel of it. But then, you know, air pollution is, you know, from the cars, from trucks, from exhaust, from smokestacks. You know, that's kind of, I think of it as an artificial thing that is added to the atmosphere. But in studying that, you also get to learn about the science of the atmosphere and how, you know, the chemistry of the sunlight in combination with the compounds, the molecules that are already in the air, and how they interact and how they're transported and blown around by the wind. To me, all that was super fascinating. The thing about that in the last 30 years that gives me hope for the current challenge that we're facing around climate change is that when I first started working at the Air District, we were way over ozone standards, we were over particulate matter standards. Our focus was on smog because we understood the health impacts of ozone, which is a principal component of smog. And we knew that it damaged crops, but it also was it's a very reactive compound, and it does a lot of damage to lung tissue. And so we knew that was bad. So we were studying this, and my role at that time was running models of air pollution to see how, if we reduced the amount of pollutants of the precursors to smog, because ozone is not directly emitted, it is formed in the atmosphere from other pollutants that we emitted from cars and trucks and from smokestacks. And it forms. But what we were finding is that through our modeling, we were seeing that we needed to reduce those precursor pollution emissions by 75% or more to get to levels of smog that would be acceptable to our health. What we found is that huge reductions that we didn't think was possible, that we were hearing from the people who we were delivering these results to. Well, we can't do that. That will be beyond what the economy of the area can bear. Those types of reductions are too much. So we ended up not using the results of the modeling, and we'll say, well, we'll chip away and do what we can. That was 30 years ago. Today, we have much better air pollution. We've met those standards for smog and for fine particles, and we did it by reducing pollution to even below the levels that we were, had predicted that we needed to do in our models. And the economy of the Bay Area is still thriving and doing well. That gives me hope that we can make the big changes that we need to in terms of reducing climate pollutants to levels. Our target is by 2050 to be 80% below 1990 levels. Well, that's kind of similar to what we were talking about for air pollution. I think reducing climate pollutants, reducing CO2 is even in some ways a bigger challenge, because now we're talking about a whole fuel change for the health-related pollutants. If you put in a filter or have more efficient burning, then you can reduce the air pollution, that has direct health impacts. For CO2, perfect combustion is you get CO2 and water. So we need to change the fuel that we're using to power our economy. So there's a bigger challenge there. But the history of air pollution regulation in California has shown us that we can make big changes, really significant changes in the levels in what we do, and have a healthy economy. And I think taking that lesson forward and applying it to climate pollutants, I think we'll find that it's possible there also. It's like, what is it going to take to get people to make the changes that we need to make? And part of it is, just the information needs to come out. It needs to come out through our media. It needs to come out through our politicians, the message from our elected officials. But I think even beyond that, we need to see how it's going to help us. So part of the way it helps us is, we avoid these bad impacts that are, we see, to make that connection between, changing what we do and avoiding the bad effects of climate change. But I think the other part of that is seeing, for many people who are struggling, who have been really oppressed and not having the benefits of the wealth of our country, and so talking about the poor and talking about people of color in many places within this country, I think what it's going to take is to bring them on board, and we need everyone on board to make this change. They have to see, and it has to be clear how our transition is going to be transitioning to a more just economy in terms of how it will help them. So I think everyone has to see the benefits to them. They have to be real benefits in order for all of us to get on board with what we need to do. We do know enough about what we need to do to start now. We know we need to become more efficient in the energy that we use. In other words, burn less. That doesn't mean that we need to suffer. It means that we need to get more efficient and do things in a more intelligent way. We can't be wasteful. So efficiency is a big part of it. We need to electrify. We need to stop burning fossil fuels directly, like gas-powered vehicles, like gas heating in our houses, cooking with gas, heating our water with gas. We need to move away from that. We need to electrify. And that helps us only if we can use renewables and non-carbon generating sources to provide our electricity. Well, I think that is part of the equity equation, is that we do best when everyone is part of our decision-making process. I've certainly seen that where I work at the Air District. When I started working at the Air District, we were mostly male, mostly white, and at the top of our agency, it's still more or less that way. But what I see happening is our workforce is diversifying, more women, more people of color. And what I see is, yes, it's, that's more equitable, it's a good goal, but I also see the benefit of that because by bringing everyone in, we make better decisions. We understand what we need to do. We see our paths more clearly for everyone. And that's I think for me has been, in this last 30 years of working, really been a big inspiration. I think the most important thing to me is about health and having health for the people who live in the Bay Area, healthy air to breathe. It's also about having a promising future, like seeing that you can have, because so much of health is about achieving what you want. I mean, it's sort of like the baseline. If you don't have health, it's hard to go out and achieve your dreams. So I think for me, having the health to achieve your dreams and seeing that that there's potential, having hope, I guess, is a big part of that. And health is a critical element of hope. Certainly, seeing job opportunities, is part of that also. But health to me is the baseline. And I think, with the younger generation, I have two daughters. My youngest daughter is 25 years old. And I recently had a conversation with her about, the state of the world and climate. And what she told me was that she didn't think that, with what's happening with climate, with the future of the planet, she didn't feel like it was a good, safe place to bring children in. And so her decision, at least at this point, she's 25, not to have kids. It's not a hopeful place to bring in new children. And for me, that was, incredibly sad to hear, and kind of the opposite of what, I've been working for over my career, is creating an environment, working to reduce air pollution so that there is that hope. So for me, that, that's the one thing. We want a hopeful future. We want to feel like the world is a place where we can bring have more children and feel somewhat confident that they will have at least the same opportunities that you had, if not more.
So we put up our first solar system in the year 2000 here in Fresno. Boy, have things changed since. If you were to fly over Fresno, look down at all the roofs, you'd be surprised at how much solar there is in Fresno. In fact, Fresno has the highest per capita rate of solar in California. When we first started putting up solar, it was really expensive. But about 5-6 years ago, prices really started coming down. The cost of solar has come down so much that it really does make sense for most people in California. It's affordable, it pays back better than any kind of installation you could otherwise do on your house, and it just makes sense. When we talk about solar, we talk about the big picture. How does putting solar on your house keep us from putting more CO2 into the atmosphere? Making a decision to do solar on your house is not really an easy one. There's a lot of things to take into account. When we talk about do-it-yourself, probably most people won't do a solar system themselves, but I'm talking about more than just do-it-yourself projects when I'm talking about do-it-yourself saving the planet. And by that, when we all get together and do these big projects, it makes a huge impact. And solar is probably one of the things that we've done here in California that has made more of an impact on reducing carbon dioxide emissions than any other thing. So there is one thing with solar panels that you can absolutely do yourself, and that is keep them clean. You can see right here, these are clean panels, and over here, there's some dirty panels, and the difference is 20 to 30% efficiency, which is huge. Keep your panels clean.